Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start. Hello everyone, and what a week it has been. Let's just cut straight to the chase. The Mormon Church, in the UK at least, is finally adopting some semblance of safeguarding, which, is pretty big news. And as you've been following this channel for a while, you will know that the Britvengers, and particularly 21st Century Saints, have been hard at work dealing with this. So, without any further ado, I'm going to bring on a Britvenger and a member of 21st Century Saints, in that order. There we go.
Hello.
Hey everyone. So if the title was a little bit vague, we finally did it, or whatever I ended up calling this live stream, the long and short of it is that through a targeted campaign of activism, we are now in the position where background checks are going to be performed on those working with youth in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the UK. Is that correct, Jane?
It is. I can confirm.
There we go. Can confirm. All right. PD, initial reaction.
Shock, because the whole way along we were like, they've said this in 2019, they said this then, and with your conversations, Jane, with the lawyers, when they were obfuscating a lot of things and they just seemed to be kind of beating around the bush, and then at the same time you've got Elder Oaks over in the States banging on about protecting religious freedom and things like that. The church just doesn't want to be forced to do anything. So when we finally found out that they were going to do it, it's just like, wow. It was a wow moment. If for me, and through the show we'll see, but do you remember when John Dillon got a bubble?
Yeah.
On the churches Why People Leave? 21st Century Saints now have a button on the church's leadership interaction thing. So yeah, wow, impressive. Well done.
Can I tell you? Speaking about this button. Okay, so this has been a roller coaster tonight. So having a conversation with me and Sarah, and it's like trying to herd a bag of cats. But that button. So Sarah,
can we see the button whilst we talk about the button?
Okay.
Not that button.
Okay. Sarah's got a family member who's just had surgery and she's had to swap bedrooms. And so in honor of Harry, we love you and big shout out and get well soon. But he has asked he's asked us on the show to make it really clear that Sarah is not sleeping in her room. It's not Sarah's room. It's Harry's room for the moment, in case the church sends some hitmen to, blood atone her in her sleep. And so she's not in that room, people. Yeah.
Wow.
So just making it clear. By request.
Well, I can understand why they would, because Sarah has been a thorn in their side for a long time now. And you know what she's done to be a thorn in their side? Jane, you can tell us, can't you? That she has given them good, helpful advice on how to keep children safe. Is that right?
Okay, so Sarah has this wealth of experience, and the whole time we were just talking about this over with some folks from some other another religion 5 minutes ago, when Sarah's talking about all of her work credentials. As a Relief Society sister, all I would have heard is blah, 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 because it doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters is if you've got a temple recommend and what callings you've served. These things aren't relevant to Mormon women and probably Mormon men too. But Sarah has been involved in creating policies. Sarah has worked with rehabilitation of sex offenders. Sarah really freaking knows her stuff. And so Sarah has been trying to say for her entire career, look, we've got problems here. Now, to be fair, not just Sarah, we have been contacted by people all over the country, all over the world, who keep bringing this up. Look, this isn't, my work has stronger, my job has stronger compliance laws with safeguarding than you do. There is a problem waiting to happen. And what we would keep getting told is, it's all in hand, sisters. We everything's fine. We've got these policies. And so there's this illusion of safeguarding, which is more dangerous because members really think we're being safe.
PD?
Can we highlight the message in chat from Finding Our Adventure just quickly?
Oh, I was going to go straight to that. Yes. Yeah, great minds think alike.
Because, thank you. Because this is a very good point. So the church will just claim it as their own, and they will, because the church, it is their own, but it's half not their own because they've had to be shamed into doing it. Can we think in the past of anything that has shamed the church so much that they've had to make a fundamental change, like some accountability in the temple, maybe the Open Stories Foundation, maybe more female interaction in ward councils, in leadership roles, maybe from some of what Kate Kelly did. So you're up there with a list of people, and we always say that the road to change is lined with excommunicated souls. So it remains to be seen if they're going to ex you or just blood atone you in your sleep, as you said. But I really do think,
so it wouldn't be us, it'll be one of our kids. We'll be fine.
Yeah. But can we think of one of these stories in living memory, or at least in our living memory? So what's that, Jane? The last 25 years for you? Mm-hmm. In our living memory, I was going to say 50, but then I reconsidered.
Bless you.
In the UK or even Europe, because we can think of them in the United States, and Sam has done a great job with Protect Children in the United States, but this has been a purely UK led effort for our laws and different things here, and hopefully they'll roll it out across the world. But can we think of another time when an activist group has changed church policy in the UK? Or is this first?
Well, I want to more than that, and I feel like I can do this because this isn't Sarah and I. This isn't Sarah, Ruth, Alana, and I. This is a much bigger story than 21st Century Saints. We were the mouths, the gobs, the podcasters. We were the people that were just, pissing people off and holding a line, and yet still having a really great relationship. We're not going to get excommunicated for this. We have really good relationships with these people. They are working really hard. If this is what it's fine. If this isn't revelation, if this is a policy, that's fine. If you want to feel that this is what revelation looks like and how the Lord works through his servants by taking their opinion, go. I don't care. None of that matters. It's the fact that they're doing it. So that to me is irrelevant. What has happened in church history is as the threat and the worry of excommunication, and are we going to push too far? As we were talking about that, we talked about in church history, the excommunicate first, and then something happens.
So the fact that you haven't been excommunicated yet and something's happened, boom.
That makes it historic, yes. But not just the fact that the policies happen, but even back when they instituted a council, a safeguarding council, in order to have a look at, making these recommendations. Can you see she's about to faint just when she does? We'll catch her. Happy Pride Month, everyone. Emma Smith is the only person who has ever taken, that we have on record, that has taken a concern and it becomes a concrete thing that, is relating to health and wellness and well-being. When a safeguarding committee was established, I was furious. I mean, great in church terms, that's everything. But we're now going to wait years and years while they make their recommendations and faff about. But this committee, they were meeting several times a week over a period of, a very short space of time. They worked so hard on this. I have to give them their due about that. And so this came in historic time. I don't know that even a committee was established, to respond to these kind of concerns. These things all happen so privately. Our opinions were being heard, discussions were happening. So I am going to, on behalf of Sarah's expertise, yeah, this is historic. This has never happened before.
So can I just put forward to some people in the chat what exactly it is that's happened and how exciting that is? So the church is implementing background checks, DBS checks as they're called in the UK, for anyone that's working with the youth, which is a big deal because to a government inquiry in 2019, the church's representatives said that they didn't need them because there was never a case, and she has fallen. But there is never a case where a background check would have prevented an instance of abuse. And so the church didn't need them. The church has got its own robust ways of doing things. Now, isn't it quite a U-turn for that same church within 4 years to actually turn around and say, oh, yeah, maybe we do need to implement DBS checks? So they weren't planning on doing it because they were saying to government inquiries that we're all fine. Then Jane and Sarah and others start speaking up, and all of a sudden the church has started doing it. This is in reference to a comment where someone said, what evidence do you have that are actually responsible for this change? Speaking from my experience of it all, there are emails that exist that show just how involved Sarah was in these recommendations and in direct communication with the people that ultimately put this decision in place. So I think it's pretty incontrovertible or irrefutable that you guys were involved and the driving force behind this.
Yeah, not just so we have all of the written information telling us that this was going to happen. We have had do you know what, guys? She's going to stay down. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Nemo, you go.
I was just going to say the other thing to validate real quick just before you go, Jane, is that Sarah has been given a calling as a safeguarding lead within the stake. So she's clearly being listened to. The first stake safeguarding lead in the UK. She has received a church calling. So how she's been sustained in that calling. How has she therefore not been? I don't get how they would give her that if they were trying to ignore her. PD and then Jane. Sorry.
I was just going to say that it shows in the past broadcasts where we've had official correspondence from church leaders from the area presidency to local bishops and stake presidents, etc., where they've said 21st century saints have been working with us on these things, but now please ignore them because we don't like them. But they like you again now, right?
They love us. We're freaking adorable. No, they do. So yeah, they do.
So there are official memos out there from the church stating their involvement in this whole process, even though the church didn't like their involvement, it was there, and it pushed them along. So
and mine, because I also got an honourable mention.
Yes, you did. Someone who sat and thingied everyone's private data that's on the church website. But is it just people that work with youth, or is this for anyone? Like, what are the bounds of this?
So everyone has questions about what exactly this is going to look like. So the beauty of it is that it is still early. The safeguarding committee is still in existence. And as safeguarding experts are being called and things are still being ironed out, this is the most exciting thing. It's not disbanded and now we're all pretending we're doing safeguarding. This is the very first tiny step that should have happened a million years ago. Now we're taking these steps into safeguarding, and that's one of the first things. So who gets a check? The UK rules kind of work differently to America. A DBS check, you pretty much do most of it yourself. You are providing this information, and it's very unintrusive. There are costs associated with it, which the church will pay. Now, 21st Century Saints feel very, very strongly, and we will be doing work on this in the very near future. Background checks must be done by third-party organisations. Now, at this moment in time, it's going to be in-house. The church is going to do this themselves.
I don't think we lost Jane there.
Oh, sorry. So,
there we go. And you're back.
Yeah, I fainted too with the shock. So it's unintrusive. The church doing DBS checks in-house is not good safeguarding. So who at this moment in time, all you can get is a DBS check at this level, for the level of them doing it themselves, are people who will, in the course of their calling, come into contact with vulnerable groups. So that would be primary, that would be the bishopric, that would be the Relief Society presidency. We would obviously like to see that extended as a matter of urgency, actually. But as safeguarding, because the other thing is safeguarding specialists will all be receiving externally, they'll be externally trained, or there will be family services will receive external training. They're going to train the safeguarding specialists, and so it's going to filter down to specialist training within wards and stakes. As that's happening, and as holes and tweaks have to happen, this stuff all gets to be fed back. And so the worrying thing for me would be is if we said, right, we're doing safeguarding and that's us finished, now you can all stop. You know, church members who are like, we've got this training video, this awful training video, and so we're doing safeguarding, and so it's fine. There's this illusion of being safe at church because members really, really believe that. This process means that you can't say, yeah, the church is doing safeguarding, because real safeguarding is acknowledging that you are never going to have, you're never going to be totally perfect. There's always something more that we can learn and be done.
Mm-hmm. PD?
I want to push back slightly.
Ooh.
Not that we can do more, right? But
Right.
it's something we discussed the other night, right? And I think it's something we need to explore a little bit more, rather than just saying it's not right. And Debbie Shrub has kind of brought up the same thing that I did, and we've not talked it all through, so maybe this is the place. But so when I or Debbie, in answer to your question, the church, what it looks like the church doing their own DBS checks is basically a member of the church who is has his own law firm here in the UK, who we all know and love. Jane, what's his name? I forget. I didn't know him that well, even though I spoke to him a few times. Brother Ford may possibly be the person. Love you, Brother Ford. To his Pride Month, that's okay. To put through all the DBS checks for the local leadership, because it's not really, is it, the bishop's job to be doing all the admin, to be checking all of the information, ID and everything. And then you've got to think of the GDPR issues around members handing copies of their ID to the bishop then scanning them through or whatever. You want this to be a very, or the least people possible handling this information. And you've got to think as well of the information coming back. Does the bishop then get the background check which states what the problems were? No, we don't want that. No. Because that will cause a whole raft of other issues. So when I at work need a DBS check, which I have in the past, as an engineer, I go out to schools and different things doing STEM activities where kids build, paper towers and different things like that, and we teach them about engineering. So to be around those children, I have to be DBS checked every few years, and to do that I go straight to the DBS website, pay for my check, and then I give the organization I'm doing the volunteer work for, the ICE, permission to access the result of my DBS check, which the result basically says I'm clear. It doesn't tell them what or anything, it just tells them yes or no. So I think what you're getting at, Jane, is should the members go direct to DBS, or should it go through the church? What are you?
It's a separate thing for? Again. So what we are looking for is, like most other churches in the UK are signed up to an organisation called 318. This is the preferred one, the one that there are others you could use, but this is the preferred one, and they would be the people that we would implement those checks. It's very, very straightforward. But what happens when a DBS comes back is that we would then have the church lawyer, possibly, who may or may not involve a team. We'll see how this is all still being hammered out, by the way. These are very current discussions. But a church lawyer would look at that information and say yes or no. Now, the reason that sounds perfectly reasonable. It's a lawyer, you know what risk is, you know, if something comes back and says, yeah, well, you know, they've had a driving, like they were speeding, these kind of things, that's not going to be so relevant. Those decisions are super easy. The problem is we've been working with survivors in the United Kingdom. It's their voices that created this moment. And we have people who are serving in the church who would not have passed a DBS check. And when this happens, everyone knows. Everyone knows that, you know, whether it was a conviction for domestic violence or whether there's rumors or allegations, we tend to find that everyone in your community knows about it. These aren't generally people who are moving to other areas to get away with, you know, a bit more. But generally speaking, the membership already know. And most certainly, if a call has already gone into the helpline about this individual, then the same individual who has ratified a calling would be ratifying a DBS check. If it's you who's making the decision and already there's problematic behaviour or concerns, the helpline lawyers are, you're part of the problem, you're part of the system, and therefore not distanced enough for it that it becomes a conflict of interest. You are not the right person to make that decision.
And you also have this same safeguarding lawyer, or the same church hotline lawyer, saying to a government inquiry that DBS checks wouldn't have been helpful and we don't need to do them. He's now the one that's going to get paid to do them. So
possibly we don't know. We don't know that. That would be the path of least resistance.
That would be. But
no,
we don't
okay,
know,
okay. So I mean, I have not been keen on doing this, but we're talking about it, and let's do it. Because it needs to be talked about. The TBM is still in here. The church lawyer, that's not a calling. That when you're running the helpline, you're not called in that same way. You are being paid to do that, and the client is the church.
This is where I was going, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So when you are also being assigned to do DBS checks as part, and you are financially benefiting from that, just to be bold about it, and the conversations that we're having with charitable organisations, all they are hearing when we're talking about this conflict is they're hearing the word corruption. It's really that problematic. And so when we're saying work with a third-party organisation, it is not to be awkward. It's not because we're saying that we don't trust you, you don't have good hearts, or even that you would make incorrect decisions, but to be completely transparent, and so that there is no mistake of corruption, to look totally clean. You have to involve a third party to do that.
You can't have individuals whose client that they are representing in public to inquiries, etc., are the ones that then are also making these very difficult decisions, because they have a conflict of interest there between the church and the individual. So that's a problem. I just want to point something out. I want to stop something right here, because just before I want to show you all some evidence that this is actually happening, because so far we haven't even given you any evidence. And if you want to see the evidence, the way that the evidence goes up on screen is you hit the subscribe button and the like button. That's how that works, right?
And like many men in the world, we're all still searching for the button.
Yeah, indeed. So if you manage to find it, please press it. Right, here you go.
Oh no, back one.
No, this is all we've got at the moment.
Okay.
This is all I've uploaded. So this is a page that's appeared on the church's membership and records system. And what's interesting about it is this page certification has appeared under an individual, And it's a page that allows you, according to what's written here, to manage, upload, and view certification documents required by some local governments, i.e. the UK government. Please refer to local government rules to know what documents, if any, are required for those that work with youth. So in the UK, we envisage that what they're saying is it will be required to work with youth, whereas in America, say, it isn't currently. But in California, say, that local government, it is. So this may well be an import from the system that's already present in the California, members in California already have this tab, and now it's been put in here in the UK. But this will allow someone to upload a certificate, give the number, give the expiration date, give the name of it, say DBS, and that's great. So say I were to get a calling, all I would need to do is get myself DBS checked, and there are organizations where I would be able to get the check done, and the church would be able to pay for it on my behalf, so then that organization would chase the church for the money. The government's own website will do that for a basic check. If you request a basic DBS check, it will allow you to defer the payment of the fee and nominate your organization to pay for it, and your organization will have to pay for it within 10 days. So there are systems in place to do this. So all members have to do when they receive this calling is they say, right, before you can be set apart, we need you to just go and get a DBS check sorted. You do it. That will get sent to the organisation, and then a representative of the organisation, i.e. the ward clerk, the assistant ward clerk, uploads it to membership profiles, so it's there. There's no need for anyone to get paid to do anything regarding that, because there are third-party organisations that will have it happen, and the church will pay for the check. PD, you look unsure at what I'm saying, but I can show the government website if you'd like.
No, I believe you. And I just think it's a bit weak source from the church. I know we've only had access to that system from this evening. So we hacked the mainframe or whatever you want to dream that we do. But yeah, so we've not had that much time to poke around in it and different things and to look. But it seems like it is just on the back of the member to upload their DBS certificate and number, which then it does take the church out of it, but it also takes out of it all the church's kind of decision making. So for me, they've kind of dodged a bit of a bullet in the fact that if the member then doesn't provide the DBS check, then they don't have to be why, or if they can't get one, they don't have to know why.
And that's quite right and proper, I'd say.
Yeah, which is great on one side. But then on the other side, I just feel like it's more and more being shoved at the member. And here in the UK, we already know. So it's push and pull. I get that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I think the push is worth the pull in this respect, because I think any child protected is worth, hundreds of hours of man hours, because it is devastating. But I just think either I think the members need help with it, whether that's a calling in the ward or the stake like they are doing. So as to coordinate all of these things, to be there.
So a safeguarding officer can,
the stake help. Safeguard. I guess talking it out now, it would make sense. But yeah, so it seems like the church could do with, like you're saying, to be able to say, we've got this deal with this third party, go and call them. They'll do everything with you that's required. And then when they send you the certificate, bring it to church and we'll put it on the system. But then the other thing is, if you really don't want the calling, you can just say, I don't want a DBS check.
Yeah. And you're well within your rights to say that. And to those that I have heard say, DBS checks don't catch anyone, well, they certainly deter some folks who would otherwise be getting access to children, because they go, I don't want a DBS check because I know what the church will find. So if so-and-so declines the calling, great. Okay.
100%. Yeah. It adds a certain layer of protection. DBS checks are a much, much bigger conversation, and how, like I say, this is why at the moment, in response to someone's question, at the moment, the church is keeping this in-house, and it is a lawyer who will be facilitating all of this. We are pushing for more. So we're not done. This will look different were it to be applied to the US, because there are some cases where, for example, if perhaps you have a polygamous background, perhaps there may be risks that you have concerns around how that might work with the government. If this was the church in any Eastern bloc of Europe, there could potentially be concerns. What it's supposed to do is allow us to risk assess each person who could work with a vulnerable group. That means a conversation between at least two people has to happen. It can't become public knowledge. We've seen lots of things happen when allegations are made and the wrong person is attacked, and we don't want to go down that road. So it has to be kept very in-house with as few people involved as possible in those conversations. It then means that in a church where you can ask young women about their worthiness and if you've had sex, or where your credentials of being a good Mormon are that you attend the temple, but you're going to draw the line out of, a DBS check, that doesn't sit right with me. We have stories from women, young men, all over the world who've been really traumatized by bishops' interviews, right? And we hear the used gum analogy. Ruth was talking about this a few weeks ago. You're chewed gum. You are no longer, worthy. You're always going to be chewed gum. Well, unfortunately, the bishops or the leaders or the people who have committed certain levels of, whether it's abuse or certain levels of allegation have happened, you're the chewed gum. You would be disqualified from ever serving as a bishop again. And I'm really sorry. You might be an amazing person, a fantastic bishop, but you cannot serve in that calling any longer. And unfortunately, with the priesthood relationships that we have with each other in the church, forgiveness is one part of this. Moving on, rehabilitation is one thing. There are some things that will have to disqualify you from serving in those callings, and the people who are making those decisions have to be able to push back against leaders who are saying, no, it's fine. Actually, we will happily let this person serve. Those are the kind of decisions that are going to have to be made.
And someone in the chat, just before I go to you, PD, is saying, if the person is honest, why do they need a background check? Abusers don't tell the church their background. This is the point. If they start getting cagey, once this becomes mandatory, which, it's already starting to be, then if they don't want people knowing about their background, there's probably a reason. And if it's just for privacy concerns, well, then they have to weigh up that choice. Do they want to do the calling, or do they want to let someone look at their background? Because that is the price you pay for interacting with children to keep them safe. That is what you do. If you're going to work with children, then you have to be willing to let someone other than you say that it's okay for you to work with those children because you have not done anything wrong towards children in the past.
And this is why the UK is
more plainly to say it. Go on, Jane.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if this is the sort of global nature of Mormonism. It is worth talking about, because UK specifically, you do not get to volunteer, you do not get to teach, you do not get to do anything that works with a vulnerable group without, if someone said no to that, then unfortunately you're barred for service. Now, also, really interestingly, FSY, that happens in Europe, because of the rules around how long you're working with children. Each counsellor is background checked. Each counsellor has to go through a DBS check, and it's one of the things on the system when you're applying to do it. I agree that I will be background checked, and if you don't want to do it, then you can't serve in that way. It's not a moral decision about you. You may have 101 reasons why you choose not to, but you can't serve in that way.
Yeah, and so someone's saying God calls people to the callings, not people. I don't want to go any further down that track, but I just want to invite them to consider why God would ever call someone who's known to have abused children in the past to work with children again. They can deal with that on their own time, with their own conscience, but failings of man being the thing that we're dealing with tonight is that the ways to stop flawed individuals from committing terrible acts using our own abilities is to enact checks.
But also, sorry, PD.
I was just going to say, we can confirm that the D in DBS does not stand for discernment.
No, it is not.
See, The thing with the
Go
thing
on.
is, it has sounded at times to leaders. That's one of the things that we've heard. Sarah and I have been told, but I do use discernment. I did know in this situation I was using. Of course, use your I see if you feel that you're experiencing the gift of discernment. What we are saying is, yeah, you can't rely on it though. That's one component, and if you're holding on to it, fantastic, enjoy your discernment, but there are rules that you have to comply with, and if that comes into conflict with that, then the legal responsibility is not ever going to outweigh your discernment. That's just the rules. The other really important thing is, as we pushed for DBS checks, we did hear a lot of pushback. They are not a fail-safe. Absolutely, they are not a fail-safe. But they are that extra level of protection. So they are not going to catch every problem, but they are going to play a part in robust safeguarding policies.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. PD, you gonna say something?
I was just going to say that I'm not of the ilk that, or in the camp that just says, if you've got nothing to hide, then why not let government have all these cameras? I know in the United States there's a whole discussion about government overreach. Here in the UK, not so much, because we tend to just tell government to piss off. So yes, there are a lot of CCTV cameras and stuff, and I know that we can't always trust the people doing the checks, and there's a whole question of, well, it's like in Mormonism, who's the god of that god and that god and that god? We could sing a hymn about it, and oh no, there is one, isn't there, when gods began to be and all that. So I'm not advocating just laying it all open, but in the church we lay open more than what a DBS check looks at when we go to the temple. And we make ourselves so vulnerable in those initiatory ceremonies, in the endowment ceremonies, when we sit in tithing, whatever it's called now. When we sit with the bishop and say, yes, I paid all that money. That is because you're telling the bishop, which is a very easy sum, what your annual income is. If you say, yes, I paid a full tithe, and then the bishop times it by 10, that's financial information that you disclosed that you wouldn't disclose anywhere else on the street or at work or anywhere. That's confidential information that's given. So people are giving this at church all the time in recommend interviews and different things, like we said about youth being asked about their sexual habits and different things like that. So a DBS check, just saying, and they're not even giving the priesthood holders their criminal records or anything. They're just giving them a certificate to say they've got it.
Someone else has checked it.
It's almost like a scout leader saying, have you got your insurance document that says when you take the boys out whitewater rafting,
exactly,
and you're organizing the activity because it's your company or that's what you do for work or you've had previous training, can we just see the certificate of insurance in case something goes wrong? And people will give those things. It is literally like that. The reason it's there is because, like insurance, it won't be used all the time, but heaven forbid something happens, it will. And that something happening is a bishop choosing to call a sexual or a secret sexual offender that has never told anyone in the ward, 10 years ago I had a conviction for this, and he wants to call him to serve in young men's or in primary. And then that's when it comes to the fore, because the bishop will have to say, please provide this certificate, and they won't be able to. So they won't get access to those children.
Jane?
I feel like we have been very direct when we have addressed specifically church leaders, specifically church lawyers. We haven't missed and hit the wall, although we have good relationships. We have a ton of information on this that we would never release because we've had private conversations around this happening. So in that spirit, I want to say with love, just to make sure that people in the comments and people who are watching this later on know where we stand certainly we're 21st century saints, and I know Britvengers stand with this. We have worked with victims, we have worked with experts in the field, but specifically the words that we have been using have been the language of people who have shared with us their personal experience. And I don't care, speaking as someone who has a relationship with the church, who is active, who Sarah also, we have a positive relationship with the church. We're members. Please be careful of the language that you're using around blaming or suggesting. That we all know priesthood leaders should do or know better. We all know that. Vulnerability to abuse happens when we are so confident and feel so safe and someone betrays that trust. And so we know, and this is why we're talking about safeguarding. Unfortunately, terrible things happen. And churches like ours, where everybody feels safe and we have these close-knit communities, and sleepovers are par for the course because your friends' parents are in the church. That's all you need is that temple recommend. You need to keep in mind that the language that you're using is what has been used to exploit victims and their weakness. As members of the church, as leaders in the church, we are all vulnerable to that.
PD, thank you, Jane.
So I was abused in a sleepover, a church sleepover, and this week's been really difficult because I eventually got up the courage 20 years later, after years and years of mental health struggle with what happened, to go to the police. And this week they closed the case because there's no physical evidence and different things. And that really hit me hard. And it will hit me hard after this as well. I know it will. But this is what we're discussing. So personally, I understand. I don't know if a DBS check would have saved that, but I know the damage it did in my life. Just that kind of sliding doors moment that person chose to do something that changed my life, forever. So I'm totally for that. And if we can save any person, child, youth, vulnerable adult, any kind of harm like that, then I'm all for it. But something you said there, Jane, which I think this is another rat's nest of a topic, and that is untrained leadership. I have been an untrained priesthood leader here in the UK, and even with this 30-minute training video, which is nothing when it comes to bishops who are trying. So I had 80 or 90 people who would come to the congregation. That's a big ward these days. It was a struggling ward 20 years ago. These days, 80, 90 people is a really healthy ward here in the UK. Now you get wards of 20 or 30. But if you're a bishop of a ward of 20 or 30 people, you are really trying. God doesn't choose abusers. No, sorry, I was just responding to Suzanne in the chat. But these priesthood brethren are so bogged down and have no training in running a church, in running a ward. And if you've got the building to look after as well, you've got other events, you've got people coming to you every Sunday, you're there for hours on a Sunday. I used to be there from like 7 till 4 on a Sunday, and then there during the week, and then on youth nights. It is a full-time job for a bishop, and they are doing their best. But as good as they are, discernment doesn't. If discernment was true, I'm sad to say, there wouldn't be one case that we've come across where a priesthood leader has chosen someone and they've gone on to abuse someone, or a priesthood leader has been called and they've had a history of sexual abuse. Because it happens. Discernment didn't root it out, because that priesthood leader is just doing their best with what they know. They're trying to look into the eyes, and they're just guessing,
So
whether they
where the two
feel it or not.
That two-pronged approach comes in, and this is where the church has started, and applaud them for starting it. You know,
shut
they
me up.
have. There's sorry.
I was on a rant. Shut me up.
It's all right. There's two prongs here. So there is checking the background of individuals and catching those that have already done something wrong and been caught. That's point one. And the church wasn't even doing that. So that is a big win, because there are people that have committed abuse that, had a DBS check been done, they would have been found and they wouldn't have been put in a position where they could have committed abuse. Okay, so that's great. That's good. We should applaud the church for doing this. The second part, which is exactly what PD was talking about, is then you need to train people how to spot abuse, how to stop it from happening, how to spot potential places where abuse could occur, how to prevent those sorts of situations from arising. So good safeguarding policy, not leaving children alone with adults, these sorts of things, right? So that's the other place where the church then needs to work, and that comes with good clergy training, that comes with good safeguarding officers whose job it is to help the absolute sort of tidal wave, constantly shifting tidal wave of volunteer people in the church. So you need that safeguarding officer needs to be a well-trained and almost like quite long-term calling for someone. You know, you need to identify someone that can be in that calling as almost a continuity individual within wherever they're working, so that they are a sort of constant point of well-trained contact for all these people going through, to make sure that that training is being done consistently and well for all those individuals, so that we can stop the abuse from happening that may be, you know, that may be perpetrated by those that wouldn't have been caught by a DBS check because this is their first time. Because everyone commits abuse for a first time at some point. Everyone has to have their first time if they're going to abuse someone, right? So how do we stop that happening? That's the second prong, and that's where I think the church needs to properly train people. PD and then Jane.
Can I just say, because I'm going to, regardless, don't mute me. Let's take the church. Let's call this organization, you absolute wanker. Put me back on now.
You are.
You're on.
Thank you. I can see the button. Right. So let's take the church out of this. Let's not call it the church. Let's call it, Soft Play United. And it's a soft play gym for children that's opened up down the street, and they're franchising it all over the country. Okay. And it's gone crazy. So loads of people are taking their children to this soft play, and parents go and sit down, because this happens every day, go and sit down for a snack and let their kids run off for an hour to an hour and a half or whatever it is. And they're quite happy not to see that child again, because they're happy that they're in a safe place and that the child is having a good time, it's being looked after, it's with its friends, and that there are helpers there from the organization who are watching out for the children, who are there to pick them up if they fall, who are there to help them. Now, that comes with a level of trust and expectation that those helpers have been checked, that they are suitable to be with your children alone in what is a difficult to observe environment, because in these places there's cubbies and all sorts of things for the kids to crawl through. So there's lots of times that a parent will lose sight of their child. The parent is not supervising the child. The strangers are supervising the child, but that's what you're paying for the kids to have a good time together, and for maybe mums or dads to have a chat and just relax. What would you say if your child then came back to you and said that that person did something whilst they were there? You would expect to drag that person before the courts. You would expect to drag the company before the courts, to have all of the qualifications, checks, and everything in place to say that the company did everything in their power to stop that happening before it happened, and that then that person is responsible. It just because we switch the soft play with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doesn't make the situation any different. Parents still send their children off for over an hour of unsupervised, or not supervised by the parents, but supervised by other adults, play in primary or in youth. And when these things happen, the church needs to be able to put forward that they did everything that they could do to stop that from happening.
And not from a legal perspective, because you look at it and go, oh, the church is trying to minimize their liability, and maybe that's the case. But just from a moral perspective, you want to know
and trust.
To have your conscience clear, you want to be able to say, come and trust us, because we do everything we can to make sure your children are safe while they are under our care. That is the morally right thing to do. It's what Jesus would do. And if we weren't doing it, we would expect that Jesus would throw a millstone around our neck and chuck us into the ocean, because that's what he said in scripture about people that abuse children.
Yeah.
Jane?
And just very quickly, I know, Jane, 30 seconds. I just want to say, it's just come up in the chat again about who does the check and who checks the checker. And it's this whole thing.
Slippery slope arguments.
Is a check not worth the one child that it will stop getting abused at some point down the years, even if it's one? We've got Doctrine and Covenants. We talk about, if you bring but one soul unto me, how great shall be the joy. And if we save but one child, how great shall be the joy, even if we don't know about it. Okay. But we live in a sliding doors world. Choices are made every day. We may not know that we made a wrong choice at some point, because we all do. But that people make choices that affect people's trajectory in life. So we may never know that we saved that child. That child may never know, but it happened, and it has to happen, because otherwise, what's the point? Sorry.
That's all right. Jane?
Yeah, let me do my grrr moment.
Yeah,
thank you, PD. So there are a couple of things that I'd like to pick up on. The first is that I really wish that we weren't having to focus on background checks, because they are such a minuscule part of this. Now, they do need focused on. I also, if it's okay, and like I say, in the spirit of the sisterhood that we share, Suzanne, I'd really like to speak to some of the where you're coming from when you're speaking in the chat here, because actually the conversations and statements that you're making, they do reflect a lot of what, as 21st century saints, we would hear from leaders. I think I commend you for being here and for listening to this discussion. So first of all, we're talking not just specifically about DBS checks, because the more important thing almost as part of this picture containing DBS checks is that training. You see, yes, Mormonism is what we're talking about right now. Yes, abuse happens everywhere throughout the world. Thing is, here in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, abuse plays out in a uniquely Mormon way. We have specific ideas and language that either we do use or we don't use, that mean that we have to look at this. Generic training doesn't work. We have to have training that specifically speaks to the kinds of messaging that we are continually given. Now, in the UK, we had the ICSA inquiry last year, which was the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse for England and Wales. The Scottish inquiry will be making its recommendations this October. But if I could just quote this just very, very quickly for you, I think this may help you understand where we're coming from. The inquiry said, across all faiths, religious leaders have significant power and influence. Now, think about this with our Latter-day Saint ears. Children are often taught to show such figures deference and respect. Those in positions of leadership often act as advisors, confidants, guides, and helpers. Religious leaders can abuse these positions of power and trust. Excessive respect or veneration of leaders within religious communities may result in a feeling that they can act with impunity, and may also contribute to a victim feeling that they can't disclose. It goes on to say there remain religious or culturally sanctioned views or practices about disclosing abuse. I want you to think about the things that you're sort of talking about in the chat, and think, if it was your friend, your child, if it was PD who's disclosing his abuse to you, think about how you're responding to that. There are religiously sanctioned views or practices about disclosure that reporting a fellow member of a religion is a betrayal of our community and religious law. Religious organizations can also prioritize their reputation above the needs of the victims of abuse, and so discourage that into external reporting. Now, when PD was speaking there, I think what we often have images of is these are, people who commit abuse and are then actively seeking out children. Now, I have been witness to that. Sarah especially, she has seen a lot of that, people who are actively seeking out vulnerable people to abuse. What is often more likely to happen in religious communities is you will find that someone crosses one of their internal and external inhibitors that would prevent them, where we don't do this. And these are not just children. I want you to also think about the context of your adult parents who are alone in a bishop's office talking about their finances. I want you to think about disabled children, the LGBTQ community, all of these vulnerable groups. When an external or internal inhibitor, when both of those are crossed, and now, if you imagine if it was you don't do these things for reasons because you have these inhibitors. When that's crossed, as a Latter-day Saint, the feeling of shame, the feeling of disgust, of revulsion. Now, you may or may not decide to go counsel with a bishop about that. You may or may not receive good support around that. But what has happened is you've done and broken those inhibitors, and there is a risk. And that risk then needs to be managed for the rest of your life. And that's normal. That's okay. No one is saying no one is saying that you cannot participate with a religious community, but factors need to be taken into place. Now, the most common type of abuse is a child who abuses another child. So these things need to be dealt with real sensitivity. And I also just, because I really want to talk about what I think is a hugely important part of this story. But PD in coming forward, and Nemo has also talked about, experiences of unhelpful and what would be considered abusive practices around counsel given from church leaders. But PD's vulnerability in doing that has been part of what has driven how we have interacted with church leaders and with charities. So, for example, 21st Century Saints, if you disclose to us, if you come to us, one of the things that we now recommend, rather than going direct to make a call to the police, if justice is something that you're particularly focused on, we would help facilitate a conversation with another organisation who will help with the historic nature of that, where PD's experience was nothing short of horrific. But what he has done, and none of this is public, none of this is in a fucking memo. What PD has done is he has, because of his experience, no one needs to experience that again, because we learned, and hopefully we've been able to tie up or close that weakness in a system. Now, that system, the church plays part of that, but also we're looking at the legal side of things. We're looking at the justice side of things. Some of the people who are speaking to us are speaking to lawyers. But friend, you have to take this seriously and know that we're not talking about loaves of bread. We're talking about, that's our PD, that's my friend. And you're talking about the person who's in your ward and who cannot disclose because they are worried about how you and your church community is going to respond to it. I'm really sorry if I went on for so long there, but
it's all right.
No, well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
I think it's important, to recognise that those attitudes that were being modelled in the chat are actually part of the problem. Yeah. And I just want to address something that someone else asked me to address in the chat, which is why DBS is such a big deal here in the UK. It used to be called CRB checks, criminal record and background checks, and then it was updated to DBS checking, disclosure and barring service. But they ostensibly do the same job, which is to check someone's criminal background for any not just abuse, but any sort of previous convictions. It's used to make sure that someone hasn't been convicted of theft before they're given a job in an area where they may be able to easily take the property of the company. It's used in other ways, and it's used just so broadly throughout the UK that it's very normal. You know, for me to work as a clinician in a hospital, I had an enhanced DBS check, so a top tier one, more than just a basic have I done anything wrong, yes or no, but what is the nature of my criminal background? And I don't have one, fortunately. You know, and teachers have them. Everyone expects that anytime they hand their child over to anyone, this has been done, and if it hasn't, they ask serious questions as to why, until it comes to the church, because we seem to rely far too much on this idea that a deity will step in and stop someone abusing our children. And unfortunately, without getting too far into that, it has been proven time and time again that that is not the case, and that people, however that happens, are able to abuse children within the confines and under the jurisdiction of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so we have been saying, Jane particularly and Sarah have been saying, that we now expect the church to do what everyone else in this country does in order to keep children safe, which is just a very simple background check. And I'm really grateful now that they're finally doing it. And I'm really grateful to Jane and Sarah for their work, and to PD as well. PD.
First of all, thank you, Jane, for those words. You know, it means a lot that you said that as a friend. But I just wanted to change the focus slightly, or two things. First of all, I want to do something the church loves doing, that is use an analogy. And this is one that I've heard at church, and it's about the bowl of Skittles. Okay, they talk about sin and about, if you knew that 2 of those Skittles were poisoned, would you take a handful? You know, speaking about being very careful about the places you go and the people that you interact with and different things, you know, about guarding your soul from the sin. But if you knew that that bowl of Skittles was each individual Skittle was a member of a ward, and that 2 of them were sex offenders or some sort of danger to vulnerable people, would you take a handful? Would you involve yourself in that bowl of Skittles? Hopefully the answer is no, just as a church would hope the same answer about the sinful Skittles. But if someone then said to you, you really want some Skittles, so I've got a colander or a sieve here that will sieve out the bad ones, and that is a DBS check. It will sieve out the stuff that the bishop doesn't know, that members don't know, that happened years ago before a person moved to the ward or joined the ward, etc. And these checks aren't new, as we've said, and this process isn't new. This process is called profiling. Okay. And what it does is it checks off a bunch of parameters and then pigeonholes a person. The parameters being used here are criminal conduct in the past. But in other parts of our lives, we've all been profiled for years, and the church already does this in the way that they send out their revelation surveys. Okay, they don't just send them out willy-nilly to anyone. They've got a department behind that who profiles all of the members and says, right, we want to know from East Asian members between 18 and 30 this. Okay, and they'll send them all a survey, and they do it all the time. I had an insurance claim once for a burglary, and the insurance guy came out and he started asking all the questions again. What do you do for work? And we tell him what we do for work. And I said to him, why do you need to know what I do for work? And he said, well, we know from data that certain people in certain jobs are more trustworthy than others. So a teacher might be more trustworthy than a banker, say. And they're profiling a person to decide how risky they think that claim is going to be. So it isn't a new process. It's been done for years when it comes to money, because people want to profile you to sell you things. You don't want to be trying to sell ice to the Eskimo. You want to try and sell ice to the person who lives on the equator in the heat of the sun, because you know they're more likely to buy it. You know, it's all about taking that system, which has worked so well to make so many people lots and lots of money, to change the focus and protect the vulnerable rather than make the money. So it's not new. It's not rocket science. So it's annoying that it's taken so long to get there, but sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, PD, keep talking. I thought Nemo had fallen down.
And it disappeared.
I'm like, let's keep going.
Someone sent a very kind donation in the chat to 21st Century Saints.
Oh, Maxine, you're
but
very dear to us.
I'm just encouraging them to cancel that off and send it to you directly. Just it'll probably be better.
Could I raise the energy just a little bit? Because obviously,
we were in the depressing podcast mode, and I was enjoying the low energy, Jane.
It's because actually, this is what the roller coaster has been. This is the world of 21st Century Saints. We're talking about the most horrific things, and we get to detox with you guys, and so I really need to talk about the work of activism, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Everyone has been asking since we first started doing this, how can we do this in Canada? How can we do this in the USA? There are areas where it's already happened, and that's wonderful, but that's because the government did that. It's fascinating that as much as we can look at it as the church is being forced to do something, the church decided to do this. There is no legislation in place to ensure it. So something fascinating happened here. So
Ahmad Corbitt was wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry to jump the gun on that one, but he was wrong. Activism does work. Carry on, Jane.
Yeah, but screw you. I was so elated at the possibilities that this raised. Because like I say, everyone's on the same page. When we were first talking about this, like I say, Sarah's the expertise behind this. We've worked with charities, we've worked with legal experts, especially those victims that we've been working with. And PD is known for comedy. This is the stuff that PD was talking with us about that helped us to shape what we were presenting to the church, what we were presenting in podcasts that good safeguarding would look like. Nemo served as what, like in the whole of January, Nemo was serving as 21st Century Saints secretary, where like I didn't do the details of the typing there. Nemo's like, okay, what do you need me to say? And he's not only giving advice, but he's getting all of this information. I need these addresses, and Nemo is doing hours and hours worth of work on that. Julian, our other dear Britvenger, he's talking about the need for directly letting bishops know. How can we let them know directly? Let's send the letters. The people who bought us stamps to be able to do that. This was the work of a community led by victim voices. And that has never happened before in the whole. So we're talking about what has the church done? Well, what about Mormonism itself as it's experienced? We are seeing leaders, specifically called leaders, in various levels of leadership position. We're seeing ex-Mormons, ex-Mormon atheists, we're seeing nuanced Mormons, we're seeing really dissident, excommunicated, still engaged. We're seeing all of this across the Mormon spectrum. And so, we had an open letter, which was being signed by all your favorite Mormon podcasters, and everyone, including members, is saying the same thing. Yeah, we want to do better. No one was looking to see, but your approach isn't quite enough. If only we had all levels of engagement within Mormonism were united. If you think about that Book of Mormon thing, with one voice, we were asking for better safeguarding. Now, it pissed people off. It did, but also no one could argue with what that request was. So that, if it can happen now, and this precedence has been set, what are the possibilities for what could happen next? And that really excites me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the fact that this has been a cause for all people. And actually, it was great timing that Chelsea Dagger just dropped into the chat and said, just dropped it on you guys. Are you LDS members who believe the doctrine but are doubting the organization? Bit confused. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who we are, what we believe. the thing that unites all of us is that we want to stop children and vulnerable people being abused. And we have a connection to an organization that is vulnerable to that kind of abuse taking place. And we used our understanding of that organization and our connections to that organization and our ability to speak its language to affect this change. And we have the receipts to prove it. We were able to affect change in a positive way to reduce abuse. And that's all that matters. That's all that. It doesn't matter whether I'm an atheist or whether I believe in God the same way that every Orthodox member of the church does. It doesn't matter whether I have my church records or if I've been excommunicated. No, that matters, because the thing that binds us all together is not wanting people to be abused anymore. And that is why everyone has been able to get behind this. Everyone and their dog that realizes that children are at risk has said, well, then let's do something about it, including local leaders that this activism was aimed at, including those that escalated this up, because unlike what someone said in the chat, this will have gone to the first presidency. They will have had to approve this.
Well, actually, yeah, and there are specific issues that still have. So, one of the recommendations that we have made is around working with youth who are paired with for home and visiting teaching ministry visits. There are issues with that, even where it's a family member. That can't be discussed at it can be discussed, but recommendations can come from an area level, but that's a first presidency thing. So yeah, this is really like at all levels. We're not exaggerating when we say that.
It forced Russell M. Nelson to put his money where his mouth was when he said at that down conference, when he said that we do not tolerate abuse. There is no place for abuse in this church. And so he said, fine, prove it. And he has. Fair play to him. He has approved a policy that's been put in place where background checks are going to be or are being enacted. Is that enough? No. Is it a step forward? Absolutely, and we should be celebrating it. And if people don't take that away from tonight, then I feel like we've done a slight disservice, because we want to celebrate this activism and celebrate the fact that the church responded to it positively. PD?
Can I just say a thank you to the local leaders who have assisted us in this, because they've had the same concerns, and yes, they can send it up the line, but they can't send it the way that we can, because they have to go through their priesthood line of authority. They have to do everything the church has compartmentalized everyone quite well to keep everyone in their place. Whereas when we're not worried about our membership as much, or standing on the ladder,
not afraid to rock the boat.
Yeah. But there have been brethren and sisters, very active members, behind the scenes, who have been helping us with this, and we won't betray their trust and put them out there because they don't want to. But there has been a bigger collective of help going on. From active members, from people right up the ladder. So thank you to those.
Those people realize, kind of as I was saying, that these are our people. These are our children, these are our families, these are people that we know, and so regardless, it's important to try and keep them safe. And a massive thank you to those that have helped in that. I don't think we'll see many a cause that brings people together quite like this, and it's been wonderful.
And it's
Jane?
Also just worth saying, worth noting that the one of the important effects of this, and because this doesn't come when a written policy exists about this won't be mentioned, but there is an opening of dialogue now. So, every person who we've spoken to, they haven't all left the church. Some people who've experienced abuse are in the church. Their children have left, or their siblings have left, and they are experiencing the church through a lens of tremendous pain. And having spoken to leaders who haven't been able to provide any answers or say, look, we're going to do this to keep, to make sure this will never happen again. They've not been able to do that. One of the things that we've been able to do for those who wish it, and where we can be assured that further harm will not be caused, where active members want to have conversations with those decision makers, they've been kind enough to give time to us while they're visiting for conferences and things like that, and have really listened, and the feedback is so far that that's been something that's helped. Now, that isn't the case for everyone, and equally, some of the roads, the routes that we're sort of helping people to go down is, looking at legal issues, looking at what kind of therapeutic services. It's also shaping the therapeutic services from LDS Family Services here in the UK. There are bishops who do not know that, for example, that did you know that you're able to help your congregant to find an appropriate counsellor, that you don't just have to pick the nearest, that the church will pay for different levels, and that if you haven't found the right person at first, the church can work with you to do that. Most of these bishops aren't even aware of that. So also, what we've been doing is helping conversations to happen, because for the most part, like our friend in the chat, you have blind spots, and you think you know who victims are. You think you know what good safeguarding looks like because you're being told that's what good safeguarding looks like. Now you're listening to and hearing the voices of victims and those who are trying to amplify their voices, and a dialogue is finally happening. And that is what is going to shape the future of safeguarding in the UK, but also in the world. So those dissident voices are needed, and we can't sort of blindly walk into this naive, it's okay because the church has got everything. If we are not doing this, then the work up until this point has been pointless.
Of course, and I think it's really interesting to kind of reiterate what was said earlier, that this was not always a smooth dialogue. We got pushback from the area presidency saying, don't feel the need to engage any further with these people, particularly the people. They accused me of spreading misinformation twice. Mm-hmm. And yet, the things I said to them, the things that I wrote on behalf of 21st Century Saints, the things that 21st Century Saints have been saying to them in emails throughout all these conversations, it still happened. Because at the end of the day, you can make mistakes in how you advocate for these things, but if the cause that you're advocating for is the right cause, i.e. protecting children, then people can dislike the way you go about it all they want. Those people eventually will realize that that is a worthwhile thing, and even if you're getting it wrong in the way you're trying to encourage them to do it, they should still be doing it. And that's why we've got this change now. They may have hated the way that we've been going about this. They may really dislike it. They may find it publicly embarrassing, whatever. But at the end of it all, it didn't matter, because they saw that what we were trying to achieve was in everyone's best interest, including their own. So, and at that point, that should encourage everyone who's listening to this to get involved in activism for causes that really matter. Because your priesthood leaders, they may find it unorthodox, they may find it uncomfortable, but ultimately, once they realize that it's the right way to be doing things, they'll start to ask the questions too, and they're the people that can really push the ball. That's just my thoughts. Have we got any final closing thoughts from people? Because I think
no.
We've... All right. Well then, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. This is the point when I say thank you very much that everyone switches off, but don't, because there's been some really generous donations in the chat tonight, which has been wonderful. If you like the work that's being done here, donate to 21st Century Saints, donate to Priesthood Dispatches, or donate to Nemo the Mormon, because we would appreciate the support, and we really... I believe very strongly in this work, as do my fellow panelists tonight. If you haven't subscribed to their channels, do so, because that's where you'll find updates on stuff like this. Subscribe here as well, because I'll be keeping you abreast. And this story isn't going away, so keep your eye on other podcasts in the near future, and we'll give you updates as we get them. We are the Kremlin watchers of Mormonism, and we love to bring you this good news as much as we hate to sometimes bring you the worst news. So this is good news. This is a good night, and I'm very proud to have been part of this. And thank you very much, Jane and Sarah, who's been in the chat tonight, and PD, for all your help in doing this. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care. Be nice to people. Hold your loved ones tight. Bye.